Well, central to growing any economy is a conversation around revenue. Of course, closely tied to revenue, of course, taxes. One of the things they say is sure about life. And as you can see, Pastor Ighodalo joins us on the program this morning. He's a chartered accountant and deputy chairman, SIAO Professional Services, joins us via Zoom from here in Lagos. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily.
Good morning very much. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Right, it's great to have you. Let's try to break down the issues. So we have what a lot of people have described as an ailing economy to revive. And just a few days ago, we saw the president signing those executive orders, suspending, some of those taxes and goods and services. And just after, the president also set up a committee on tax reform. So it looks like maybe all of these activities are geared towards something in particular. But regarding tax reforms, raising revenue, help us understand this. Just how much of work or job is ahead of this government in that area?
Quite a lot of work, because government has somehow not paid enough attention on tax as a source of government revenue. They set their FRS some targets. The FRS struggles to get some of those targets through foul or fair means, and at the end of the day, they keep going. But there's a lot of issues challenging tax in Nigeria right now. The first issue, as far as I'm concerned, is data and the making sure everybody's tax inclusive. Nigeria consists of a formal and informal economy, and the informal economy, the one that's not captured in statistics or in banking and all that, is a bit more, it's much bigger than the formal economy. The formal economy is civil servants, a few people employed in oil and gas, banking and all that. You capture them. A few corporate people, you capture them. But there's a huge amount of people in the markets, on the side streets, in the interlands, in the rural places. Most of them simply don't pay tax. So the first thing that the government really needs to do is to get everybody on the tax net. They seem unable to do this because they're not even able to solve a problem of statistics, of identification, of the national ID. And any country that does not have a national ID system, does not have the data, does not have the knowledge, does not have the information on its people, it cannot provide good taxation, cannot manage its people, cannot plan, it cannot also provide enough security because you don't know where the people are. You don't know how to get them. Most advanced countries, they have a good ID system. America has social security number. Britain has their own ID system. And with that, you're able to track your people. You know where they are. You know how they move. You know what the migration rates are and all that. But Nigeria just has no information to date because we've played so much politics and corruption with something as simple as population and national ID. So until you can get the people totally on the tax net, we will not really know how much we're losing from not being able to pay tax. So you may want to adjust the tax laws, do this to the tax laws and all that, but it's still, for me, just a palliative. It's not really touching the heart of the issue.
You said get more Nigerians into the tax net. What a lot of people will interpret that as is get more people to pay taxes. I imagine maybe you're talking about a database, have more people on the database first so you can know just how many people we have. But let's stretch this even further. Just let's imagine that widening the tax net means more people have to pay taxes. Can Nigerians really afford to pay more taxes? I mean, we have poverty figures, multidimensional poverty figures released recently saying 133 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. So just how much more can Nigerians pay? We'll get to the government side, but let's speak to that. Can Nigerians really pay more taxes?
Well, everybody should pay some tax. It's just a question of your mindset. So if you're earning 1,000 naira, surely you can pay 5 pence or 5 kobo tax, or 10 kobo tax, or 1 naira tax. Tax is tax. So everybody should pay some form of tax because everybody's benefiting or should be benefiting from some public service provision from roads to water to electricity, blah, blah, blah. So everybody can pay tax. It's just a question of mindset. I don't even think there's anybody really too poor to pay tax. It's just what should the tax rate be? So like I said, you're earning 1,000 naira. Surely 50 kobo or 1 naira or 2 naira you can pay as some form of tax, if you change your thinking. So if everybody in Nigeria was paying 1% or 2% or 3% at the minimum of whatever they are earning as tax, you can work out the maths. It will be a phenomenal amount. But then, of course, the more you earn on a graduated scale, the more proportionate tax you should pay so that you yourself reduce a bit of your own personal consumption so that you can contribute towards the social services that you are benefiting from. That's the whole idea of tax. Part of the problem with tax is that the education of people paying tax is not well done. So everybody needs to go on the road, everybody needs to have pipe of water, everybody needs to have electricity. So what we're saying by asking you to pay tax is for you to contribute to the social services that you yourself are enjoying. So in the end, taxation, really, you are paying yourself to benefit from things that are communal, But the problem with Nigeria is that government hitherto has not been sincere. Government hitherto has been very, very corrupt. Government hitherto has not delivered to the people the benefits of governance and the results of their being managed. So people are very, very, very unhappy. People are apprehensive, and people are having to provide for themselves infrastructure and facilities that government should be providing. So there's a whole gamut of things that needs to be dealt with for us to have an effective government and effective taxation.
Yeah, Pastor Itoa, corruption is another big matter. But before we delve into that, I want you to educate us on those items in the tax review, particularly with the committee having been constituted, whether it's the VAT on telecommunications, the single-use tax, the green tax on vehicles, and the tobacco tax. As the committee will begin discussions, what are those points that should be emphasized upon in the deliberations, such that when it will be implemented, it will be from an informed position, such that it will be a win-win for those paying and for the operators within the manufacturing sector where those taxes are concerned?
For tax to be beneficial, it has to be real, realistic, it has to be fair, it has to be progressive, it has to be beneficial, okay? So what had happened was that, first of all, most of the tax laws in Nigeria are very archaic, very old, most of them from 1950-something, 1960-something, 1970-something, and they don't speak to the reality of our developmental needs in Nigeria at this point in time. That's one. Number two is that a lot of governments have not been really sincere as to how to handle the issues of tax, and they have not been very forthright in dealing with the realities of the on ground. Thirdly, the Buhari government went into a state of panic. You have a budget that's about 6 or 7 trillion in deficit. So even before you wake up, you're already owing. You don't even have enough money that you're generating to pay your salaries for workers. So where are you starting from? So they went into a panic because they went into this spending spree, wanting to spend to reflate the economy, borrowing all over the place, and suddenly the revenues and the expenditure didn't make sense. You were making like 6 trillion naira, and now you want to spend 12 or 13 trillion naira on an economy that's not working and that's not generating income. So they decided to face tax and see what they could do with tax, because we've had almost a 1 unit oil revenue source, and even that revenue source is so inefficiently managed that we're not getting the best out of it. So they went into this so-called Finance Act 2022 to see areas in which they could just harvest money. So they faced telecom because they believe that the telecom companies were making money. and they put in a 5% there and ask the telecoms to be paying, forgetting that the telecoms are providing such a great service and reducing stress on Nigerians that there will be some kind of feedback, kickback. They also went into green tax on plastic use and all that. I think that's a response to international environment issues. And they didn't even explain to the people what all this green tax means, and they just slapped it on. Then they went into excise duty on importation, excise duty on manufacturing, which to me didn't quite make sense, because what we're trying to do in Nigeria is to reflate the economy and get people to be manufacturing. Now, if you start dissuading people from manufacturing by increasing the cost of manufacture, it's likely people will run away from it, or it will be too expensive for us to manufacture in Nigeria. We can't compete with foreign goods, which is part of our problem, because we're importing most of the things that we use in Nigeria, when in the reality, most of those things can be produced in this same Nigeria, but we're importing them because we have such a flat economy that's not working, and so on and so forth. So the tax that the Buhari government put in was not very, very thought out. It was almost like, for me, a knee-jerk reaction and just a way for them to harvest some economy, some money. So I think the Tinubu government has come now, having removed the subsidy on oil, having adjusted the exchange rate. They are now saying, okay, what are the palliatives and comfort we can offer the people? And the first thing is to do is to balance this issue of taxation, because one of the wrong things that the Buhari administration did was to even backdate the implementation of this so-called Finance Act 2023, because there had been a law in 2017 saying that if you are going to make any changes to taxation, you must give a 90-day window for the people to adjust and to reprogram themselves and to get into the new tax rate.
Pastor Ichua, if I get you correctly, you're saying that most of these taxes are needless, and are you calling on the committee to repeal them, when they sit for this review?
Most of them, they should rethink them and repeal them, because what we want, from my own point of view, is to rebuild Nigerian economy. We want an environment that will encourage manufacture, encourage agriculture, encourage production, encourage business locally in Nigeria, and discourage importation. So what they should be facing is really increasing taxation on the things that we import, so that it's more expensive to import and cheaper to produce in Nigeria. That's what most countries do to protect their own economy. I'll give you an example. We are importing bitumen in Nigeria to produce roads, okay? And we have a great amount of bitumen in the Ondo area, in the Ogun area, and we're not touching it. And that bitumen is going to waste. We don't need to import bitumen. We have more than enough locally on the ground. So what we need to do is a tax regime that discourages the importation of bitumen and encourages Nigerians to produce bitumen locally, although that also might be a constitutional problem right now. But constitution, tax, reform constitution, change tax, so that Nigerians and even international people will be more encouraged to come into Nigeria to produce the things that we already have sitting on the ground. That's what this government should be thinking of doing.
But Pastor Ichua, I hope we're not losing sight of the fact here that, government embarked on, this tax implementation drive in the first place to generate revenue such that the budget can be funded. If there's still so little to do, so much, and this tax will be taxes are repealed, wouldn't it compel government to embark on securing loans yet again, which is already a big problem for the administration, which has the former administration, which has dug the country into a very big debt hole?
Unfortunately, the government didn't also tell us, project to us what they were hoping to generate from this new taxation and what proportion of this budget deficit it will fund. If it's a significant proportion, well, it can be like an emergency tax to cover that hole. But if it's not significant, then it's a total waste of time. and it's punitive on the people. So I don't have those figures. They may have those figures. We may look at it, but I can tell you for free that they didn't do that level of research. As I said, I think it was totally knee-jerk reaction to these things. Besides, one of the biggest challenges of our budget, and I stand to be corrected, is corruption and waste. You know, you have a bloated civil service that is not producing, and you keep paying them. For example, you have 3 or 4 refineries that have not produced 1 drop of petrol in the past 10 years or 8 years. And those people working in those refineries are earning salaries, going on training, and doing all manners of things. It's a total waste. And that's just one of many. And even within the government establishments that are seeming to be producing, I think they can even do their work with a fraction of the staff that they have, that they're paying right now. And so the government expenditure doesn't make sense. And again, nobody has done what I call value for money audits on most of the expenditure of most governments, both subnational and national, in that a road that should cost 1 billion is costing 3 billion, 4 billion. And where does the difference go? It goes into private pockets. It goes into private expenditure. It goes into foreign exchange. It chases again the very scarce foreign exchange that we have. And we have Nigerians storing money all over the place that is not producing in the economy. So first of all, let us clean out the budget and let us see what we really need in Nigeria to keep the country going. I'm sure that if you cleaned out the budget sincerely, removed all the padding, removed all the waste, I'm sure that with 3 or 4 trillion, maybe 6 trillion, we can do what they're telling us that 12 trillion will do. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in Nigeria. And we need to, first of all, be sincere with ourselves. Government expenditure is phenomenal. It's unbearable. Convoys to start off with, overheads to start off with, salaries, which is not much, you understand? But the volume of people that you're paying, maybe that's our social security system anyway, but what proportion of Nigeria's population are being paid by government and they're earning so much? Okay, out of 200 million people, maybe 3 million are government staff, and they're taking almost 40 or 50% of our earnings. So most of Nigeria's money that we generate from outside is going to such a small proportion of people. So the rest are just left to their own devices, struggling all over the place, running up and down, you know. So the percentages are a bit lopsided, you know. What we should be spending on infrastructure and development, we're spending on consumption and salaries.
Well, you know,
it just doesn't make sense.
Pastor Ighodalo, there's still that question about multiple taxation as well. You have states, you know, charging multiple taxes. Just yesterday, I realized that, you know, people pay taxes in Lagos for TV, like TV license taxes in Nigeria, and you know, I was really shocked. And that's aside different taxes for small businesses. But we'll come to that maybe. But let's go closer to the seat of power, Chamberlain.
Well, yeah, Pastor, from the look of things now, I mean, having seen some of the policies that the government has put in place, yes, they put in place a committee as well to look through some of these particular things. So how would you recommend we look at the broader picture? Because, I mean, they could talk about the short term, but on a larger scale, how would you recommend we approach this?
The issue of government funding, the issue of the economy, or the issue of politics, what really are you wanting me to focus on?
In terms of the policies on taxation.
First of all, we need data. We need information. The government simply does not have information. You are talking long term now. We need information. Places like Canada, Australia, they plan 50 years in advance of things. They do future studies. So we need information. We need statistics. How many people are in the rural areas? How many people are in the urban areas? How many people are gainfully employed? How many people are self-employed? How many people are running companies? And so on and so forth. It is this data, okay, that will be able to tell us how best to plan our tax. who to tax and how much to tax them and where to get our taxation income from. What if we don't have data, we don't have information? It's just not going to be possible. It's as simple as that. So that's long-term planning. Number two is the vision of the government has to be very, very clear. What are we trying to achieve? What area of our expenditure do we put in more resource for the development of Nigeria over the next 10, 20, 30 years? That vision has to be clear. What do we want to put money on? Is it education to inform and upgrade the people and make them self-productive? Or is it infrastructure to create an environment where business can thrive? Or is it security so that the people are protected? And what percentages of our income do we need to put in these things? For instance, they should be able to tell us in Nigeria, how much do we need to spend on security to make sure that the place is safe? And how do we spend it? How much do we need to spend on education to make sure that 90% of Nigerians are educated over the next 5 years? How much do we need to spend on infrastructure to make sure that we can get our goods from the rural to the urban areas and then even house them and warehouse them and store them for people to eat? Nobody has that information. I can almost tell you for free. And if they do, they're not making it available. So we don't even know what to work towards in Nigeria. So when we do budgets, most of the time, it's based on last year's budget. You add a percentage and then you spend some more. But nobody's telling us that this is the outcome eventually over time of these monies that we're going to spend. When you don't even know where you are going, how can you get there? And when you get there, how do you know that this is where you intended to go? So a lot of these things are just by roads. People are just doing it, not thinking through, not giving us exactly what's going on. And Nigerians are just following. And it's like government is some kind of magic or some kind of big masquerade that just keeps going. You can't challenge them.
Indeed, the goals need to be clearer. But let me bring up this scenario, which is what I heard yesterday. Pastor Ighodalo, I don't know if you can hear me.
Very well, I can hear you.
Fantastic. So I heard our data analyst talking about this executive orders that have now been signed and likening them to a lollipop, which he says is very sweet, but is not filling. And I don't know, I mean, from your own assessment of, the policies so far and the reliefs that it seeks to give businesses, how effective do you think that this is on the whole? Because he says that, for a number of businesses, this might come as a mild reprieve, but what they really need, what the average Nigerian really need is to tackle where inflation is really hurting the average Nigerian, because inflation has taxed Nigerians more than any other taxation that government has put on them. And one of the areas government should be looking to is curbing inflation and food insecurity. For you, I mean, as someone who is a finance expert, do you have any ideas how governments can begin to do this right now?
To tackle inflation and food security, most of these things people know. It's whether there's the tone at the top and the political will to do them, and whether it is beneficial to the implementators. That's the problem. I agree with your friend. This is a palliative, and that's what I used. He called it a lollipop. It's a palliative. First of all, those taxes had not even been properly effected. So we didn't even know the effect of those taxes. And it talks to only a small percentage of the economy. And it's good to correct it, to be sincere, because as I said, the last administration was a knee-jerk. They started implementing taxes that should be implemented 90 days later, almost immediately, just confusing the whole polity and all that. I think it was the telecom one that was the most incisive, and the telecom people pushed back. So Nigeria, what we need is a producing economy that is making all that it needs and using whatever it makes. So I said, if I was president of Nigeria, for example, the first thing thing I will tackle is food security. Very, very important. And it's very, very simple. We have more than enough land and potential to produce food in Nigeria. And what I'll simply say is that we eat what we produce. And we produce. Are you with me? We eat what we produce and we produce what we eat. So if we cannot produce it in Nigeria, we will not eat it in Nigeria. So whatever we are trying to import as food, we'll look for a Nigerian alternative. So instead of importing rice, let us just eat yam, as much yam as we want, until we're able to produce the rice we want to eat. Instead of importing corn, maize, let us just eat the maize that we produce until we're able to produce all the maize that we need. You may give a year or 2 years for people to readjust their thinking and then make sure that you implement this. You'll just find that everything we have growable in Nigeria, people begin to grow and eat it and forget about importing anything. That's number one. Number two is to educate the people to such a level in which they are self-productive. So you are educated enough to get a job. You are educated enough to be self-employed. You have enough skill to earn enough for yourself and to feed your family and to pay some taxation. The third, of course, is security, because where there's no security and people cannot move around freely, it is going to hurt and harm the economy. People won't come, people won't invest, either internationally or locally, and so on and so forth. If you're able to deal with security, then you have a lot of people able to go about their businesses and to feed themselves and look after themselves. And then, of course, number four is power and infrastructure. Those are aids to production. When there's power, when there's infrastructure, what will take you 3 hours will probably take you 30 minutes or 15 minutes. It means you can do much more in less time, and it's not as expensive for you to do those things. If a government faces these four things seriously and critically, and then we restructure the government such that what should be done at local government level is done at local government level. What should be taxed at local government level is taxed at local government level. What should be done at state level is done at state level. What should be taxed at state level is taxed at state level. And what should be done at national level is done at national level. Similarly with taxation, that will also then eliminate multiple taxation, stress and distress that people go through. So the local government really needs to be strengthened. They should be part of the constitution and budget. We should know clearly what we want to do with the local government. Otherwise, you eradicate local government, you deal with state. Let state take its own responsibility for its local government. But we need to take government down to where the people are. There are many, many places in Nigeria totally ungoverned, not one touch of government. They don't even know that government exists. They just go about their jobs, doing whatever they can just to eke a living and survive. Nobody does that in this century. It's just unbearable and unfair, and so on and so forth. Even within metropolis and big cities, you find a lot of places that are like a jungle. Government doesn't go there. They don't have any idea what's going on in there. And therefore, you find that the strength of the Nigerian economy is not being able to be unleashed.
Touched hugely on corruption in your analysis and narratives. Stories abound in relation to that about, how manufacturers would rather not pay taxes and will, evade their responsibility in that regard. And the reasons are not far-fetched because of corrupt officials who would ask them, to pay their taxes to them because there is no evidence of tax payment in the first place, which is pretty much supports that view about the trust deficit, between government and, the citizens. So how can this also feature within that, tax review committee such that, reforms can be done in that regard to plug the leakages in tax collection system?
Really wants to pay tax everywhere in the world. Even in America and in Europe, people have tax havens, they have tax evasion, tax avoidance, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. And the reason why people don't want to pay tax is because everybody looks at tax as unfair, punitive, and so on and so forth. What a lot of governments, including the Nigerian government, has not been able to do is to sell to the people the benefits to them of paying tax. And the people don't see it also. Why would I pay tax when I look after my garbage myself, when I have borehole in my house, when I provide 2 generators to look after myself, when I clean my own streets? When I moved my church to where we were, I had to do the road by myself. I had to fix the road because there was no road there. And this is the second time I'm doing it. In Christchurch, we did the same. In this place, we did the same. And these are the challenges people face, and they do not want to pay tax. So the government has to change the narrative. Government has to be transparent. Government has to show people the benefits to them of paying tax. You know, we wanted to fix a road recently, and I was telling all my neighbors, let's gather money together, let's fix this road so that we all can have an easy passage to our homes and to our offices. And they were ready to contribute because somebody went to them to sell an idea and a dream, and they were ready to be part of it. So government has to change the narrative and sell to the people the benefits to the people of paying tax. And then they themselves must be accountable, they must be transparent, and they must show the people that your 1 naira of tax, this is how we spent it, and not 1 kobo of it escapes into graft or corruption. If government is able to do that consistently, you'll be surprised how people will be really, really willing to partner and cooperate with government and pay their taxes. There will still be 1 or 2 people who will dodge or evade. You can't avoid that. But that's where the law comes in.
All right.
That's where the law comes in.
Clearly a very interesting conversation. I was going to ask you, and I know you worked a lot with the Labour Party presidential candidate, and I was going to ask if this is significantly different from what he would have brought to the table. But we're totally out of time. Perhaps we'll pick this up another time. We'll be speaking with Pastor Ighodalo, who a lot of people might not know this, is a chartered accountant, actually, and Deputy Chairman, SIO Professional Services. Thank you so much for your time on the program this morning.